This episode of the Real Talks podcast is brought to you thanks to the MGF Group, a premier building material supplier in New York City. Whether you're a seasoned contractor or a DIY enthusiast, the MGF Group offers a wide range of premium building materials to suit your every need. From cement to lumber, protection materials and safety nets, the MGF Group has got it all under one roof and pride themselves in timely and reliable delivery. Check out the mgfgroup.com for more information.
This episode of the Real Talks podcast is brought to you thanks to the Taylor Public House. Right on the doorstep of Madison Square Garden, the Taylor Public House is the perfect place to connect with family or friends before taking in a concert or sports event. The Taylor is known for its warm welcome, classy ambiance, and comfort food. It has 2 floors, 3 bars, and 2 private event spaces for parties and gatherings. Be sure to stop by and experience the Taylor Public House for yourself, located in the heart of Midtown Manhattan on the corner of 35th Street and 8th Avenue. Check out thetaylornyc.com for more information.
Hello there, welcome to the Real Talks podcast. I'm Alan O'Mara, an author, speaker and mental performance coach with sports teams in the US and Ireland. We originated this podcast in County Cavan, Ireland, where I'm from, and are coming to you this season from New York City, where I'm based now. In this new season of the Real Talks podcast, we're diving into meaningful conversations with authentic people from art, music, sport and life. We're recording today at Stella and Fly, a coffee shop and wine bar on New York's Upper East Side, so you may hear some clinking glasses and coffee pours in the background. With all that, I'm so happy to be joined today with our first guest of the new season, comedian Katie Boyle. Katie is an Irish comedian living in New York City. Her debut album, I'll Do It Myself, dropped in June 2023, hitting number 1 in the iTunes charts nonetheless. It's been streamed more than 330,000 times on YouTube. Katie tours all over the US and Ireland. She's the host of the Shift podcast, has been heard on Sirius XM. Katie's been featured in The Hollywood Reporter, Irish Independent and The Irish Times, and is currently touring her new hour, Terapy. Katie, you're very welcome to the Real Talks podcast. How are you?
Good, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for making the time. I know you've been busy and a conversation I'm really excited to have with you.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm happy because I have my oat milk cappuccino that I didn't have to pay for. So I had the phone out ready to go.
It's a strong start from episode 1 of the Real Talks podcast.
You get free cappuccinos. We're really living the dream in America.
I know, right? We've come a long way.
I mean, cappuccinos are expensive in America, so...
Yeah, we only got drip coffee, so they must have really rolled out the
I think
VIP
because
treatment
I had already
for you.
ordered it. He was probably like, oh no.
I suppose with that, Katie, obviously we're here in New York. We're both not from here, grew up in Ireland, have come here for different reasons. And I suppose maybe I'll just start the conversation with asking you to tell us a little bit about growing up in Ireland, what your memories were of that time and kind of how you reflect back on, I suppose, growing up in Ireland, kind of what that period of life was like.
Yeah, I feel like it was probably not uniquely Irish. I feel like I've got more Irishy since I moved here, if that makes sense. I played Gaelic football, but I just lived in a suburb outside of Dublin. So, I mean, it's Kildare, but we think we're Dublin, but it's Kildare. It's Leaslip, so it's on literally the border. And then my dad lived in Longford, so I spent a lot of my weekends in Longford too. So I had the near close to the city and the country. So when I was in Longford, it was riding horses and going to a lot of Gaelic football matches, obviously, because they're just obsessed with it there. But then in Leaslip, I was getting drunk on the weekends, as you do when you're 13 and smoke cigarettes. But I don't know. I feel like my brothers and sisters are younger than me, and I feel like they got a more Irishy background because they grew up in Longford, so they would go to Score. I went to the odd one, but they would do Irish dancing, and so when I was in my teens, seeing them doing stuff like that, or my early 20s before I left, I was like, oh, I want to do more Irishy things. So then as soon as I moved over here, I was like, oh, I wish I knew the language. I feel like growing up in the suburb, it's more just it's kind of just I don't know, basic, if that makes sense. People are like, oh, did you Irish dance every weekend? And I was like, no, we just listen to regular music. And yeah, so I don't know how to answer that question. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, there's no right or wrong answer with that stuff, and that's definitely sounds like you got kind of the best of both worlds as in terms of kind of some of the the urban stuff being closer to city, but then also having the escapism of like more rural Ireland. And I suppose, what had you been doing in terms of work, or like what were you doing kind of in life before you moved here? What was kind of life like that just pre kind of coming to America? What was that chunk of period like?
I went to art college, and so I was at IAGT. So that was a 4-year degree, and I was doing that, and I was also working at a bar. Well, it was a hotel. I was a server in the hotel, and it had a bar alongside it as well. So just was working there 4 days a week and going to college the other 4. So, which is 8 days in a week. But so it was just pretty busy. And then when I got the chance to move here, I did. But I came here to do art, not comedy. So.
Okay. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about that kind of the decision that drove you to kind of, do the up sticks and move, kind of pack the bag. Did you think you were coming for like a shorter window with a view to going home, or were you kind of set of like, okay, like I'm away now, I'm going to go try and experience like something new or to be somewhere else? What was kind of going on in your head at that point?
It wasn't, I don't think there was like a plan to it. So for me, like, okay, so like regular normal answer would be like, oh, I just wanted to experience new things and, try to be successful in the art world. Whereas New York is, New York, Berlin are like the 2 places, or London, that you hear with the art world. Real answer is that I was in a relationship for like 3 years. And when I broke up with him, he was like, I hope you're doing well now. But he was like a little toxic. But like, who isn't during a breakup when it's a man? And then the men are listening to this being like, well, a woman burned down my house. Okay, I know, but I'm just going from one gender side. But he just was a little toxic, and we worked together. And then there was this one girl who didn't like me at the job, and I guess they kind of started seeing each other, and he kept using it to try to talk to me, or he would turn up outside of work drunk. At the same time, I'd cut out my mother 6 years previous, and she had started seeing my boss at work, even though we weren't talking to each other. So then I did the art degree, and I was doing really well in it. So I walked by a visa place one day, and they said that if you were graduating, you could do a graduate visa. So I just went in and put my savings on it, and I was just like, I kind of need to like go to a different continent so people stop bugging me. But like it was more just like escapism and like try to like sort my head out and kind of get away from people.
Yeah, so first of all, absolutely love real answers on the Real Talks podcast. And then, I suppose like you literally had that moment of you talk about like a sign presenting itself of like, I'll go try. Like literally, it was like an 8x2 sign. So you went straight in, kind of put the savings on that grad visa, and were like, I'm going to go and give that a try. And it was like, obviously, as you touched upon there, multiple different things were happening, and just sounds like that kind of feeling of wanting like kind of a new space, or kind of just to try something new, to get away from certain, call it smoke, that was following you around, to kind of start afresh or to try something new. Is that kind of what that was? Because
even with like going to college in Dublin for, I don't know if there's any American listeners, but it's done Leary, so it's not like it was like 2 hours every day and 2 hours back to, because I was renting in Kildare. But even going to Dublin was like so nice, because it's like a little taste of a city, and how you can kind of like just, I don't know, like I grew up in a small town, so everybody knew each other. Like when I broke up with my boyfriend at the time, like it was hard because he was like entrenched in our friend group, and then when I started hanging around with different friends, he somehow got friends with them. So it was like you couldn't. And then my mother, who I wasn't speaking to, was in every night on like climbing over this boss who was like, I don't know what it was about, because he was like 20 years old or 30 years older than her. I don't know if it was like whatever. She's just mental. But so it was, that's the way, it's just a small town where you're like stuck in this kind of box, where Dublin was a taste of like, I'm doing art college, or a little like, you can kind of meet people from different walks of life. Like I had a friend who was South African and like religious, but what was kind of cool too, because I grew up where people are like, we're not really religious anymore. But it was just like, she was just like, I don't care, I'm religious. And you're like, this is cool, you are who you are. And then an older guy who turned out to be one of my best friends, but he was like close to like my dad's age, no offense if you're listening. But like those type of things where you're like, you can like meet different people. So then like going to New York was like it was like exciting, like, I'm going to meet different people and like figure out who I am, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Like I think it's like definitely kind of, and like lots of people that are listening to this will have have moved before or thought about it. I certainly relate a lot to what you're talking about in terms of, I suppose, like when you start that journey of trying to piece together like who I am. Like sometimes it's just easier to kind of speed it up by going to a new place, because you're not like weighed down by the baggage of like the past, but also other people's impressions of you who try and like pull you back into the bits you've been before or what you did before.
No, it's so true, because I dated this guy for 2 years in our town, and he's actually like, it's not like a soup, like he wasn't like, he was just, how do I explain it? He would like drink a lot, and he was kind of like the little bad boy, and but people would never drop that I dated, like even until like I moved over when I was 23, and so we dated from I was 15 to 17. I think I broke up when I was 17, or maybe younger, maybe I was 14 to 16, and so from 16 to 23, people would still bring that up. Like I'd be working in the bar and they'd be like, oh my God, did you date? Because he was like such a, like, you know, and also, by the way, now looking back, I'm like, why are you judging him? Just because he's like, kind of like, he was a little bad boy, but it was like, they were also judging like, I can't believe you would date him. And it was like, I'm fucking 23. Like,
I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah. But I mean, that was like so many years later. And it shows how they would just really like, you're just, whatever, you're kind of, stuck in whatever box they put you in, not meaning to, but it's just like they know everything about you too. You kind of, when you go to a new city, you get to like meet new people, and you get to tell them what you want to tell them. They don't know who you dated when you were fucking 14. They don't know that you were like drank a lot and smoked cigarettes. You get to just like redefine yourself a little bit.
Yeah, like that makes perfect sense. And definitely like I grew up in like Dublin, and then we moved to Cavan when I was like kind of 10 or 11. So I kind of got the same kind of both sides of the experience that you talk about. And even like growing up there, you have loads of positive memories, formative experience. But like that, I feel like sometimes in smaller towns, like it's almost like once there's like a label put on your back, like a little post-it, it's like that post-it can never come off. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's like, and then people like, not that it's label or putting you in a box. And then I suppose as you kind of, obviously you're on your own journey, then you find yourself here, and it sounds like around that period of time, Katie, that, you know, Dublin had kind of opened up eyes a little bit in terms of, you know, pushing forward with that path of expansion, of growth, and of kind of new stuff.
Yeah.
So what was it like here then? Actually, you kind of have those little conversations in your head, I'm going to America, and you probably, I presume there was a combo of maybe excitement, but then was there any like, where am I going? What am I doing? What was the reaction when you told people that that's what you were doing and like that you were going, first of all?
I don't remember what the reaction is. I think it was just like, good for you. I don't think, and I think I was just excited. I don't think I was really nervous or I don't remember. I just remember being here, and then I had like a distant distance. So my great grandfather's brother emigrated to America. So that before I moved here, his great, I don't know what his generational people had come to visit Longford and had met us. So when I was moving over, I had already like someone I kind of knew, and he had offered me to stay with him in Connecticut while I like found my way. So that was kind of nice. So I stayed with him and his family for like 6 weeks until I got a place.
Just to find your feet.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. I do feel like I should circle back and be like, I think I'm being too nice to the guy, because now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, he did fight a lot and like try to headbutt people a lot. So maybe they were just like, I'm so surprised you would date someone like that. In hindsight, no, I think I'm being too kind to that guy, because he would headbutt people in the town, like throw oranges at them and stuff from his car. So maybe they're just like, you're quite nice and polite. Yeah. Maybe they were trying to be nice. Okay, sorry everybody in my town.
they wanted better for you.
Yeah. And I'm like, stop judging. Me being Mother Teresa over here, but of sex.
So finding yourself here then, Katie, so then talk to us about that transition. So like, you know, you've made the decision, you're here, and then that kind of, that window you enter into of that kind of finding your feet and then like growing here, and like what's your memories of kind of that time in terms of just like the making the move, and then actually, I suppose just making the move, but then like, you know, setting up life, but also building and growing a life, which there's ups and downs to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So what was that like?
I feel like when I first moved over, I was working in a place where it was also a lot of immigrants. They weren't Irish, so there was a lot of like Eastern European immigrants or Latin immigrants. And that was my first job, and I became very close with them. And then when I moved to New York, the next job I got again was a lot of like, the bar that I worked in was like a couple of like white American women, and then a couple of Latinas. And when I came, there was definitely a divide between the two, which was so interesting because I'd never really seen that before. And the Latin girls said I was with them because I have an accent, and they were like, you're not, you're like obviously with us. So that was kind of fun to have like this group of like immigrant girls like take me in, and like I'd be downstairs eating like food that no one else got in the restaurant because the chefs made them special food, like chicken mole. I'd never had that, which by the way, for Irish listeners, that's like chocolate in chicken as a dinner. And it's really nice. But like that was really nice to meet some people from like a different culture and see the similarities, because I felt like I related with them more than the American girls to a point. I have a lot of American girlfriends that are great, but I was just like, oh, I'd never met anybody from Peru or Colombia or Ecuador. And just like the links like with religion, or the links with like them coming here and trying to like find themselves too, or like, you know, and they're still my friends to this day. And we've all kind of like came here, worked that job, and then went and got the careers that we wanted. But they were the ones to tell me to do comedy, where as in, you know, we'd be just like working at this place 5 days a week. It was the worst money bar. It was the worst restaurant bar money you could ever get. I don't know how, but it was also like as immigrants, it was just easy to get that job, because it can be quite hard when you come over to New York. You have to have bar experience. Everybody thinks it's really easy, but it's actually not that easy, because you have to have bar experience, or you have to have like, a lot of us were like on an internship visas, and we were just like, you know, don't look too hard. don't rat me out, anybody listening. But so I would just tell them stories, and then they were like, you should do comedy. But I think in Ireland, everybody's really funny, and everybody in my town was always really funny. So I never really spoke up. Or I remember even with my ex, someone would say something and I would whisper something to him, but then he would say it out loud and everybody would laugh. I did not know at the time he was stealing my bits.
Stealing your jokes.
Stealing my jokes. But like with them, I just got to be like, tell stories, and they were like, they were just like laughing all the time. And I was like, I had no idea I was funny. So that's nice. But yeah, so that's why I started comedies. But I think just coming over and meeting people from different backgrounds. And I think, yeah, sometimes if you're like, I'm glad I didn't just go over and just stick with Irish straight away, which I still love Irish, and I've got some really good Irish friends. But I'm glad that I was like, they brought me like to salsa dancing, or like reggaeton, which I didn't even know existed, like all these experiences that I wouldn't, or like Peruvian bars that I would have never gotten if I hadn't just come over and tried to like meet people from different walks of life, not just go straight, which the Irish Network and the Irish Ashland Centre and all those are really great resources, and I'm really glad I use them now. But for anyone traveling, I think when you first go away, it's good to meet people who aren't just from the same country as you.
Yeah, because I'm sure that like helps in terms of this, like the widening of perspective, and then just picking up like new parts of culture, different ways of doing things in terms of just like actually experiencing that. And it sounds like you found kind of an unexpected almost like community upon landing in terms of that work that you were doing. And as you said, like sitting down, eating the different food is like such a simple example of it, but just kind of finding that community that then are pushing you in terms of expanding like your boundaries, or maybe activities that you probably wouldn't do.
Well. Yeah, they don't want, it's not like, I remember someone telling me, that there was this guy in our town who, and it does not affect me at all because I do not mind, but that he was like drunk one night and he was like, who does she think she is doing comedy? And it was so funny because like he's a plumber. I'd never be like, who do you think you are doing plumbing? Like it's just jobs. Like who cares? Like I could never do that. And I think that's really impressive. The toilet seat broke yesterday and I was like, Leland, to my boyfriend. I was like, you gotta, and it's like not that hard to fix a toilet seat. So to me, that's really impressive. Any other job to me is really impressive because I cannot do it. I do not know how to do an Excel. I use it for my jokes. I don't know how to do it. But my point is, so it's like to be like, oh, who does she think she is? It's like, but whereas like you come over here in New York City specifically, everybody's coming to live their dream. So if you're like, I want to be a pigeon, people are like, fucking be a pigeon.
Good for you.
Yeah, be it. That's one thing I do love about Americans, I will say. And in any immigrant that comes, like in New York City, everybody here, no matter where you're from, they're like, you do you. I also have like the immigrant thing. You come over and immediately, no matter where you work or no matter what you do, if there's another immigrant in the room, you're like bonded. And people tend to like Irish people, which is nice, thank God. Let's keep it up. Let's keep up the good reputation. But like, because even in comedy, a lot of my, like all my close friends are immigrants as well. And you just kind of bond. And then they're so well, like a lot of my friends are Muslim. And one of my best friends is Jewish. But there's been things that I've been brought to that I would have never really experienced in Ireland. Even though there was like a mosque outside my grandmother's house, I would have never like even thought to like, I don't know. I wouldn't have really thought even about like I'd never go in or anything like that. Which is funny because now since I've gone back, I've seen that they even have an Irish, like everybody's welcome, which is so nice. I just love that there's like, because there's Arabic, Irish, and English. But anyway, because I brought my friends back and I was showing them. I was like, look, we have a mosque. I know. I'm like, I don't know if this is bad that I'm showing it off, but they let me celebrate Eid with them, and that's something I would have never got to. Of course, as the white woman in the room, I did make sure to take the photos. I know my place. No, it was, yeah, I just don't know if you go to a city where there's so many different cultures, you get to really experience. I know people, and then you have more empathy for people. Like, I feel like anybody who doesn't have empathy for a person from a certain religion or ethnicity, it's because, well, obviously you're being a bit racist or whatever, biased or discriminatory, but also maybe because they've never actually stepped out of their small little town, and that goes across the world. Like those people in the South sometimes when they're like afraid of whatever immigrants, it's like, yeah, do you actually have friends? Like I think multicultural cities are the best because then you're just like, there's no reason to. You're.
And there's just so much more like natural crossover from like basic conversations, like some of the stories you've shared there, and just like those kind of, but also then talk about empathy, like the shared experience and the storytelling part of it. And then it also sounds like some of your sharing around that time was done, like, as you said, you're making groups laugh, and they, like that community, that group was like pushing you forward for comedy, which, and again, if I'm like picking this up right, like that wasn't something that was like on your mind, like that wasn't something you were planning or...
I'd never even I didn't like public speaking. I hated when we'd have to do presentations at college, like that was like hell. So yeah, no, never. And then a friend from Ireland actually visited, and she was like, oh, we should go to a comedy show. And I was like, I'd just seen Darryl Breen once, but I never even would have thought of going to comedy shows. And then when I was watching it, I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And there was a girl who got up, who's still my friend to this day. I should really text her. I haven't texted her in a while. But anyway, she was so funny. And I guess for me, like I had seen, who is now my friend too, Maeve Higgins, I would have seen an odd bit from her growing up, which I think a lot of us would have, but I wouldn't have seen I would have never seen a woman doing stand-up. I would have just seen her on the TV. And I think I saw like one clip of her online once, but I just, that was my first time seeing a woman live, and she was way better. And there was only one woman on the lineup, and she was way better than any of the guys. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. And then that was kind of it. Then I went to a show where they let audience members come up and tell a joke. And then afterwards, the guy who booked it was like, oh, you're so funny, you should do this. Usually audience members don't get up and tell a joke. It's usually open mic comedians. So that's so like good that you came up. But then he also turned out to be a little creepy. So, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It worked out. Not super creepy. I feel bad. He's not going to listen to this. It's just he then like kind of came on to me and didn't tell me he had a girlfriend, which I found out later. I don't think he really knew that I was actually going to be in the comedy scene. Okay.
So,
which was that was my first insight to men in comedy.
you got a lesson, or it presented itself very early. Yeah. So like what I'm curious about is like, so you get up on that night where you say you get out of the audience, and was it like, in terms of your style, was it like a joke? Was it a story? Like, did you share like an experience? Do you remember kind of what that experience was, or kind of how that moment went? Yeah, I shared a story just about dating or whatever, and it went well, yeah, and that was enough to be addicted. That was enough to be addicted for... Did it fire you up Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I think every Irish person would do well at stand-up, at open mic level, because we can tell stories and we're just like quick and stuff. Whether or not it can pursue into a career is different, because you need to also then remember it, like have stage presence, build it. There's a whole business side to it as well, like emails and all of that stuff. But I think most Irish people are good at telling stories and good at being quick, because we all talk so much. So if you don't talk, if you don't get to the point quick, you're going to get interrupted. So I feel like it's a good lesson for doing stand-up. Yeah, I definitely, for sure, Irish people, definitely the ability to kind of storytell, kind of would be known for it. Quick wit, as you said, conversations is like almost competing for conversations or stories. And then kind of just building that out, like how it goes from... So you do that and you get like that. It sounds like you get like that endorphin rush, and you get like that. Obviously you landed it and it was good, and like you got like that rush. And then how does that kind of start building into like a set or doing it as a stand-up? Like, is there any moments in between where you're like, actually, that was just a good moment and I should just like, remember that moment and have it and like go back to doing what I was doing? So talk to me a little bit about that kind of
that still
trying
happens.
to bridge that gap. Yeah.
That still happens where I'm like, oh, I like this. No one else is going to like this. And you just have to get rid of it or work on it. But no, when I started, it was just, I didn't really know what I was doing. I just would I immediately started going to like 3 open mics a night because I was like, okay, I want to get good at this fast if I'm not going to do art anymore. And that's why I came here. But I don't really remember. I just remember it was just like going to coffee shops, writing it down, trying it. And if it didn't work, I also wasn't like sensitive with it because because at art college, they make you do criticism classes every week where everybody in the room has to say something like, not mean, but negative about it. Like, so that way, when you're building the art piece, you can have, because art is, I was going to sound like a bit like snobby, but this is why I didn't like art in America, because it was a bit snobby, where I didn't find it as snobby in Ireland. But anyway, like I could make something and then your perspective and Mary Kate's perspective and then Gary's perspective is going to be completely different depending on your experiences. So that's why they would do these weekly where like say something negative, like a negative critique so that you could make it better, but it not be like rude. But so that going into comedy, then you're not sensitive because you've got like a bit of a thick, that was at the time, that was the only thing I had thick skin in because I was actually quite sensitive with everything else in my life. But I really worked out well for comedy because then I was able to go, okay, that's not good, move on, or fix this, move on, without ever feeling like hurt by the audience because they didn't laugh. I was just like, it's just like art.
Like it definitely takes a bit of like, there's obviously courage to it and some like resilience with on that side of it, and then also kind of from your perspective, like also having like the clarity of like kind of knowing where this is going, and I've been like open to, I suppose you're doing self-reflection, of course, but then also like picking up on like feedback that's coming back from audience, I'm sure trusted kind of people that you have around you as well. Like as you're trying to piece that puzzle together, which I'm sure is a never-ending puzzle. Like you think I got a few bits of that together. Oh no, it's gone again, or I've got to like work on another few pieces over here. When did you feel like it starts kind of like landing for you in terms of like, I know when you done like the first like full set and like uploaded it in terms of, because we actually watched it at the weekend. We sat down and watched the whole name's gone blank on me.
Oh, no, the special was it? Yeah, I'll do it myself.
I'll do it myself. Yeah. Sorry, yes, I was trying to think of it there.
No,
we watched the full piece at the weekend there. And so like,
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be. I thought it was great.
Okay,
we were chilling on. It was like Sunday. We were just like, you got plenty of laughs from our apartment. Genuinely, I mean that. So talk to me a little bit about kind of, I think of you as like climbing the ladder and like, okay, I'm going to fully like, this is like it now. I'm going to do it and put it out there, and like getting it to that point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to own this, I'm doing it. And then like, what was that kind of process like, I suppose, getting it to that point?
So for me, it was always winging stuff to a certain extent. I also am like very hard working too. And I'm like okay with saying that. I think a lot of Irish people are. There's something to do with like, I think it's generational trauma, because I think I don't know, like my dad can't sit still. A lot of people I know at home like are such hard, like really hard workers, and then you come over here and there's like a thing to kind of like prove yourself. Like, well, I left my country, I gotta make this work. So I do think just in general hard work with stand up. So that's just making sure that you do all the stage time, you do the write, and I don't really write, but I do more like, I think about the things that I want to, and then I write down bullet points, and then I'll get on stage and see where the funny is in it.
Okay.
But yeah, so like just kind of the hard work element of it. But wait, to answer your question, I don't know when it really started. I feel like for the pandemic, for me, a lot of older comics fucked off because they were like, I can. And then all these spots opened up because New York City didn't close down with comedy. The clubs took to the parks, they took to roofs, but then there wasn't comics. I was doing guest spots a lot and I was still doing open mics. But when the pandemic happened, I got promoted in like a lot of comedy clubs because all the bigger comics went away. And that was like, for me, the pandemic was such a good time for my career, and doing Zoom shows too, because it like, and doing park shows, subway shows, all of that really built my confidence because it was like places where you wouldn't usually have to do comedy. So I think for me, it really helped for like my stage presence. And then fast forward a few years later, because I'd started in New York Comedy Club when I was like a really young comic, and I started with like checks, guests. Then they did this late night thing. Then they did checks again differently. Then I did guest spots. Then I did paid spots. Then I did emceeing, and then I got the longer paid spots on the weekend. Now there I still MC and do the longer spots, but at the special was recorded in 2022 in September, and in the summer, I think it was like May, someone had reached out to me about doing a special. And I said that to the comedy club where I work, and they were like, well, you're doing your first special with us, which of course I didn't even think they would be interested. And they nurtured me as a comedian because they give younger comics this chance to grow on actual a club show. So then they were like, okay, so do you want to do it in August? And I was like, when's the latest date I can do it? And they were like September 18th or something like that. So then from like May to September 18th, I wasn't headlining. I had featured a lot. So then I had to put this hour together and put it on the road really quickly. And so with me, I just will take every opportunity and just make it work. If it means just, cramming and doing it as much as possible. And so I just emailed a bunch of places, got to headline during the summer, work it out, and figured out piecing all the jokes together, what worked better and what flowed better. And then when it came up to the special, I decided not to have a host or opener so that I could crowd work up top, so that I could link in the audience with my bits. I'd know, when I had that couple about biracial dating, there was a couple that were biracial. Or when I had the jokes about my Latin friends, I knew in the front row who was Latin as well, or who was Irish. Because I wanted to make it seem like on the night it's also a unique experience. And there was a load of older comics who told me not to do that. They told me, I'm crazy. Why break the wheel before you've even been on the wheel? You should just... And I was like, you know what? I don't really care, because at the point I'm like, no one really knows me anyway. So if it fucking tanks, who cares? Yeah. And I just think you can. I think you can fail and go again. Robert Delaney is a great example of that. He's now... Robert Delaney, if you're listening to this, don't. I think that's his name, but he's the guy with Sharon Horgan.
I know. We watched that one.
Crashing. No, not Crashing.
No.
Catastrophe, yes.
Thank you, Mary.
And his late night set is one that just didn't go well, and it's always shown to comedians as... But he's so successful, and I think it shouldn't be oh my God, it didn't go well. It should be you can fail and keep going. It's it's better to try it out. But anyway, all that to say that's my process. Just take the opportunity and fucking make it work. And I'm so glad I didn't take older. It was funny, because it's older men who were don't break the wheel. But then when I talked to older female comics, they were like, fuck it, try it, do you? And I was like, okay. And they were these two older American girls that are just so nice and have such a good career that I'm oh, I'm glad. They were yeah, we just fucking tried. And I'm that's, I'm glad I stuck with what they said, because now the special has done so well. So I'm really...
It's done so well.
Yeah. And for me, look, it's 2024 February. That feels so long ago, because it took us 14 months to put it out. And I'm oh, that's so funny, because I already feel such a better comedian. And when I put out the next one, I'm going to feel the same too, because it's something that you're just growing at always. I feel comedians, if they're, it's something as your life goes on, you're going to change, you're going to have different stories. The older you get, you're going to have more life experience, you're going to be more self-aware. So I just think, I'm glad it did well, but I also feel oh, I feel I'm a different comedian already.
How does it feel when you say if you log on and you see that the special that has, well, I think it was 330,000 views on YouTube, and that's something that to have gone through the process which you've just talked about, and then even the bits of don't do that but do this, but actually no, fuck off, I'm doing it this way, and then seeing that kind of, I suppose, land with people, find its audience, and then you're on this really good part of a journey now where it feels your star is rising, and kind of you're adding more venues and going around the country, and that just definitely feels it's exciting. It's got to be, right?
Yeah, no. And then the thing is, I just think as well, they're working smart as well as working hard. So with my special, we didn't release it until I also had a new hour I was running on the road, so that when it was released, I could immediately have a new hour, so people who watch it aren't being okay, well, I've just paid tickets to go see the same thing I saw on YouTube. So it kind of was worked out well that it did do well, because now when I go do shows and people are coming out, they're also getting a different hour too. So yeah, it couldn't have worked out better. So I'm really happy.
No, it's brilliant. Like, I suppose one of the things that like jumped out to me as kind of as I took in the show and watched it, Katie, was like, I suppose your willingness to be, I suppose, both vulnerable in the sense of like personal experience and like real life experiences, but then like this ability to mix that with like, you know, you talked earlier about the Irish storytelling and kind of even just like, I suppose different stories. Like, is that something that you strategically like wanted to like share, like in terms of your own experiences and like using comedy as a way to like share life lessons and to maybe resonate or relate to other people that maybe have, I suppose, you know, dealt with some of the things that you've talked about, or maybe, you know, just trying to educate or kind of get people to understand better kind of some of those issues and some of the stuff that goes on around them?
Not originally, but I remember early on someone saying, like, explaining to me what hack is, and hack is like something that multiple comedians will do. So like if it's like, which I'm always like, I think it's fine if there's a unique spin on it, but let's say like everybody does Subway jokes or everybody, but if you have like a fun spin on it, then it's fine. But that made me realize that like if you do personal stories, it's never, it's always going to be unique to a certain, like people are still going to have similar experiences, but it's your spin on it. And then also people can't really take the material either. If they do, you're like, well, that was very unique. I hardly think you were in Kildare in 1998 or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But so that was early on. It was like, okay, if I just do my own experiences. Also, that's just easier comedy because you're just pulling from things that happened and trying to pinpoint the funny aspects of it. So it's just, instead of being like, okay, what's, for me, I remember a comedian once telling me, like, it was a Cork comedian actually, I forget his name, like Ross Brown or something, but he was very sweet and he showed me his process of how he writes a joke, and it was like really good. But I remember being like, oh, that's so hard. I can't sit down and be like, okay, tables and curtains, what makes tables and curtains mixed together so funny? But I was like, okay, where's my own stories? So like, even though his is that's a really good technical way to do it, I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to be that type of, where if you tell a story, it's a little easier. Plus sometimes it can be quite relatable because there's people in the audience who are like, oh, I think that, but I'd never say that out loud. And then the other aspect was that when I did the podcast with Des Bishop, he was very much like, we're going to share personal experiences. And I remember being like, fuck, this is a nightmare, but I really want this opportunity. And then I'm really glad that I did, because sharing some of that stuff, like, you know, we talked a lot about like sex or whatever, you know, that was like, oh my God, are my family going to disown me? But so many people were so positive with their like messages and stuff that I was like, oh, there's something here with just like being honest about things that are usually seemed like shameful. So that really helped me just be like honest about a situation. Plus, I think that when you're honest about something, it's the funniest thing. If that makes, it's just like honesty is the funnier part of a situation.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a beauty to some of that in terms of when you're talking about what can be difficult subjects, like if it's like, you know, toxic relationships, or if it's with issues with your parents, or if it is like, you know, generational trauma or different things like that. Like, I think the authenticity of just owning it and kind of being like who you are and kind of opening up like that, I think, like as a performer, whether like no matter what walk of life it is, like in terms of building connection with people and getting to resonate, I think that honesty is an important part of it. And it definitely jumped out to me as kind of, as I took in your show and I watched, like I felt that honesty, like, and I felt that authenticity of like, I suppose even as like, so sometimes you get up on stage, it's like there's a little thing can kick into your head of like, oh, I need to like present the best version of myself instead of just going, well, actually this is just what like happened, or this is how it went down. I think your ability to mix that, Katie, with like obviously humor and your storytelling, like it is, I felt like both, like I felt from watching, like, yes, I got multiple laughs and it was like joyful, and like, and it did, like, it brought me joy, but also like I felt like empathy, and I felt like connection, and I felt like educated while also like while taking this in, if that makes sense.
Oh, good, thank you. You know, it's great to hear. I feel like now with my new hour as well, like I learned a lot from that, and just how to like, because even with dating toxic men, I have so many jokes about that in my old special, but with my new special, I have like more ownership over it, because now I'm old enough and I've been to therapy to know that also I did pick them. I did find the craziest fucker and push him over the hill. So like, it's fun to like be able to talk about that and kind of like, not to like blame myself, but also like to dive into that kind of like, why would you pick people? So I think like that's the sort of stuff I want to talk about. Like, yeah. So I don't know. It's fun.
No, and absolutely, like I was going to come and talk to like the Terapy, and first of all, like I got a great laugh when I saw like that Terapy tour and like this how it's spelled, because like the very first night I met Mary Kate, my partner's like friends, like, you know, I do like the hard T as well, like 33 tanks. So they always say that, even to this point, if I'm saying something to them, they say tanks.
Yeah.
I presume that's what the joke is, or if it's
yeah. No, my age right now is 33, which is the worst age to be as a Irish person in the States.
Say 33 again.
Yeah. They just die. If I'm on stage and I'm like, oh, it's I'm 33, they'll just start laughing and I'll be like, this is abuse.
It's like, comedy's really easy, actually. Say my age.
Yeah.
But that was one of the other things that really jumped out to me, and I love, like, even in terms of my own journey experience, like as a young like athlete, I would have like engaged with counseling and therapy like early 20s. It was so impactful. It helped me so much in terms of, I would usually describe it as both surviving at that time in terms of like, you know, kind of climbing out of a hole and getting back out, just slightly back above ground. But then it also helped me like with, I would call it like thriving, like actually trying to push forward, piece your life together. Who am I? What am I about? How do I want to live? And I kind of felt that as I watched the first special the other day, like, and I kind of loved it too, because you were kind of still somewhat in it. I mean, you could say we'll always be somewhat in it, but like actually like been self-deprecating about going to therapy, how that is challenging you, how that is evolving you. And if it's okay with you, kind of want to just touch upon like that, I suppose, therapy experience, because like your passion for it, and like you're like, I think you're quite positive about it during the show in terms of the impact that it had. And I think it's no coincidence that your current tour that you're going around in is called Therapy. Like, I think that's kind of a big strand of your recent chunk of life and kind of your development and view and kind of your views on things. Would that be fair to say?
Oh no, absolutely. I'm so happy I went, and I'm so happy it's done too. I think like for me, therapy is like if you pull a muscle and you go get like you're a health guy, what's it called, like a muscle guy who
a physio,
yeah. Like my brother is literally studying to be a physio, and I completely forgot the name for it.
He's not doing muscle guy studies.
He's a muscle guy. He's a muscle guy study. But no, so you go for a while till it's better. So that's how my approach with therapy is. I've had a couple of friends here who are like, no, you go for the rest of your life. And I got to a point where I was just like, I'm just looking for things to talk about. Like I just, So for me, it was for a year, it was perfect time. And I love it so much because like there were so many things that I was like, oh, this is like a me issue. Do you know what I mean? Like maybe getting a bit sensitive or maybe getting a bit defensive. And they just teach you like, oh, if you're feeling defensive or feeling sensitive, like it's probably more, it's a you thing than the people who are doing it for the most part, you know, sort of way. So then like going into life, I could be like, oh, when, you know, my partner says this, it's not a personal attack on me. He doesn't know my childhood experience. I mean, he does now, but I mean, he's still never going to know everything, what triggers are. And so that way you can just like kind of do the thought process in your head of like, oh, okay, like that's not something and a personal attack on me. This is me just feeling a bit triggered or whatever. I'm trying to think what else. Loads of things, like just like how even when someone is projecting that on you, like sometimes you'll have a friend who's like projecting stuff on you, and because you've been to therapy, you're able to like be like, this isn't about me, this is them. And then you can kind of be chill with it until you're just like, okay, they're just not in therapy right now. And you know, it really like helps you like sidestep a lot of arguments. Or even I remember like I would work so hard at the bar, and when my boss would like, I would go above and beyond a lot of the time. And so then when my boss would point out like, oh, you didn't like clean this glass, can you go do it? I would internalize that as like, oh, he doesn't see all the hard work I've done. He thinks I'm blah, 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 blah. But it wasn't at all. He was just asking me to go clean that glass.
Sure.
And so after being therapy, I also realized as well, I don't need to do that much either, because who am I trying to prove myself to? Like I am a minimum wage employee on a day shift. I don't need to like be exhausted after work because no one else does. I can do what I'm meant to do. And if I want to do a little extra grand, I don't need to get a gold star to feel good about myself. You know, it's just whatever so that was what was really good with therapy too, that I think I was like overextending myself with all these people, like people pleasing.
Yeah.
But I really,
for
in
like
the end,
external praise or trying to get like,
for like validation or whatever.
Yeah, I get you.
therapy teaches you, like, you give your own validation. Oh, it's like a game changer. I swear to God, it was like I got a insecurity transplant, So I love therapy. I think and I'm in a 3-year relationship with like someone who's very nice and chill. And I don't think I would have ever been able to be in that relationship if I hadn't have gone to therapy, because they also teach you that you just like repeat. It's so hack when you're like, oh, I'm just Freudian case, but you repeat what you see in your childhood. So then once you know that, then you're able to be like, oh, this person like that I'm feeling this attraction to is just a childhood trauma. And this person who seems kind of nice, and I should let that grow and build and see. So it's like, it's just so many and so much more. But
yeah, like as I listen to you there, like, and like I appreciate you sharing that, because it's always like, I feel like a lot of the time, like there's people like, and tell me if this was you or if it wasn't, but like therapy will kind of pop into your head and you'll think maybe I should try that, but then usually you'll tell yourself, you don't need to for a while. Like, and when I go back to certainly my own experience, like there's 2 or 3 times in my life where I was like really, really struggling, like genuinely. I remember like typing the number into my phone to call it, and you'd look at it and you'd make it right to that point, and then you go, no, like I'll give it another week. I'll see if it's just like I magically put all this together in a week. And I remember like actually, like, so you make that call and you get into that kind of, I suppose, the unknown. It's somewhat unknown when you walk in. Like, what did you think you were entering into, and kind of what surprised you about it, or was it different in any way than what you expected, if that makes sense?
Mine was Zoom.
Was it? So
or like an app, because that was like, I have, really cheap health insurance. So it was just like, an app. But I think I remember just like being like, oh, so this is who I am and this is my life experiences. And so like giving them the full background of like, let's say like relationships with parents or and then that way I just went in completely honest. But I think I was at that point with you too, where I was just at the like, I was fed up with myself, like listening to myself, or how I was handling situations, or how I was like in my head, like overthinking everything, or having friends who needed so much from me that I was like I couldn't give that much. But then, so when I went to therapy, I just gave her my full background, and then it was really good because then she was able to be like, oh, you have friends like this because you have like savior fantasies because you felt like you weren't saved. And I was like, well, that's very poetic. Or you overthink, because that's like, or because you had to as a child, because you're constantly thinking like, when's your mother gonna flip, like all these things. And it's so good because then you're like, oh, you learn then going out in life, like no one else is gonna be like that. That's like 18 years of that's taught you how to interact with the world. But I understand the waiting for it, because I waited way too long, because I cut my mother out when I was 18, and then I did go to therapy until like the pandemic. So right, like during the pandemic. So but I just think you have to just hit rock bottom. Like I've like friends who I'm like I have so many friends because it's comedy. Like when I say friends, I'm loose and fast with that term. But people that I meet and be talking, and I'm like, oh, like I'm excited for them one day to go to therapy because this is really like some sort of fucking childhood trauma being triggered. But you can't tell people, they have to hit rock bottom with it. And you see people in the comedy scene like really hit like, or like family members where you're like, one day they are going to figure out, but it's because people are afraid to open that door because they're afraid to fall apart, because they're just all like, they're it's all like squished in. They don't want to pull out any like unknown memories, I think, or they don't want to talk about the horrible experiences that make them the way they are. But actually, when you talk about it, it's like a relief. It's not like a, like it doesn't make you worse. It just it takes it off your shoulders, and it's someone that's not your friend, so you don't feel bad unloading on them. Yeah, like, and I suppose that kind of neutral, unbiased, like non-judgmental pair of ears. Like, actually, as you were talking there, Katie, like it made me think about, like, I remember like could have even been my first session, honestly, and I share with you of like, because it kind of I think affirms what you're saying of like, I remember like my therapist like basically was, so I did the same as you, like went in, just
like dump. Like here's everything that's been going on for the last 10 years. I remember there was a little sandbox in the room, like very cliched, and like he drew like almost like a bucket like in the sand with his finger, and then said like here's like a person's like emotional like vessel or whatever the word was, and he drew a line across it like halfway up saying like here's where most people's is, like we all deal with stuff like emotions, feelings, what we're carrying around every day, and he was like here's where yours is. So like right at the top. So he said like now every time like something small happens or medium happens, like it's causing like an overflow or an explosion or like a reaction, and kind of you had touched upon some of it I described. And where I was going to join it up with was like in terms of like, because as you were talking, I was listening, I was like, it sounds like it was very like a process of like developing like self-awareness and kind of being able to look in the mirror, look in yourself in terms of how did I respond to that? Like if I were back, would I do that differently? How would I do it differently? And I suppose like what I found going through that was like, okay, so you're carrying around this stuff, so you need to like offload it. But what I found was, and I would be curious kind of your take on it, was like the reflection piece. So like a lot of time in life we're just busy, so it's the next thing, you have an interaction, you have a reaction, but then move on to the next one, but kind of repeat the same patterns. And I found like as the self-awareness developed, one, you would reflect and be like, okay, how did I, like what happened? But then you get better at, well, what's happening right now? And then you're actually able to be more authentic and be more yourself in real time rather than maybe needing to go and, you know, if you've got to sit down and journal or go back to a therapy session. Would you relate to that, or does that kind of resonate with you anyway?
No, 100%. I do find, because even my boyfriend, he's like so sweet, and I don't know any of his childhood trauma in 3 years if he has any. But he does still like have to like go off and process things. And like when we were first dating, we would clash a bit with that because I think going to therapy, you learn to like talk about things in the now, but not everybody does that. So like still to this day, if I bring up something, but now he's able to communicate where he's like, he doesn't just shut down. He goes, I just need to think about that for a bit. And I'm like, that's okay, come back to me. Because he also hasn't, but that's him being at that point where it's like when we first were together, he wouldn't even say that. He would just like literally be like a robot just turned off. But I understand what you're saying, being able to in real time, because even because my mother is like she's clearly probably mentally unwell or possessed by a demon. I haven't decided, but I'll never talk to her again, and I'm very happy with that. My life is so good, but I think that's fine. I think like I did till I was 18. A lot of people can't relate, and if you can't relate, good for you. You had a wonderful mother. Don't fucking put that on me, because sometimes people will be like try to make you feel bad about it, and it's like you don't know my experiences. So anyway, but I'm really glad. I do feel like if you do have like 18 years put in my time, and if I were to tell people what my mother did and it was a partner, they'd be like, fucking dump him. So I do think like with parents, if it is like bad on your mental health, you can definitely like walk away from that relationship. But it meant that I had like a high tolerance for like maybe like crazy and like kind of toxic stuff. And my mother would be very emotionally abusive and very gaslighty and all this stuff. So what was good about the therapy is that it taught me not to maybe like let that into my life and maybe not react like to people gaslighting, or like I don't have to explain myself to people like that, or I don't have to. So a good example would be there was this one person who, I don't know, they just kept trying to argue with me about something, and it was looked like my boyfriend was there, so it was like nice to have a witness, because he was like, no, this is completely out of line. But I was just like, I'm not getting into this. And this person still to this day will send me emails about it, and that was a year and a half ago. But I don't respond, I don't ignore. A lot of it's like kind of goading as well and trying to get me into the conversation to have this argument. But what was really good about the therapy was that it taught me that I don't need to defend myself to anybody. I don't need to, if they want to think this, or they want to, you know, even if they want to say things to people too, like who cares? Whoever really knows me will know that this person's just kind of off the rocker, and they've kind of taken a issue with me, and I don't need to engage. And that's what was like, so that was the best thing for me with therapy. Like if your issues are yours, I don't need to take it on. I don't need to explain myself if I've already done it once. And I think like kind of those toxic personalities sometimes can like find people who are a bit susceptible to it, because I had a high tolerance or crazy, I wouldn't notice it straight away and let those people into my life. Whereas therapy taught me like, oh no, that's not normal. That's for like sure. Their issues. Don't take that on. So I don't know if that was a good explanation.
No, it's an incredible explanation. And also what it sounds like, Katie, is that like, as well as obviously being in that environment where you're developing your own self-awareness, like it also then helps you become aware of other people and who's around you, and then kind of, I suppose, how every relationship is like an exchange and a give and take, but then actually being able to identify and be more aware, if not in real time, certainly much quicker in terms of what the dynamic is and if that's a good thing for you or not, and being able to kind of, I suppose, like protect yourself in relationships, be it like whatever types of relationship they are. It can be in work, personal, family, like it doesn't matter. It's relationships are across the board, you know?
Yeah, because I do think like a lot of people will date what they know. And then when you learn not to date what you know, so if it's like if your father was an alcoholic, sometimes women tend to date alcoholics or vice versa, because you date what you know how to handle that person. Like I grew up with a mother who would fly off the handle, but I know how to handle that. I know how to be calm. I know how to be patient. So I would date a lot of guys like that because it's like, oh, I know my role in that.
I gotcha.
But once I cut them out because of therapy, then there was like new friends who tried to fill. Like I don't think I realized that you could have that in friendships where it's very toxic or taking advantage or projecting their insecurity so they can have a fight with you and replay whatever fucking childhood trauma they're having. So then that was really good with the therapy, trying to spot that then with friends. While I was in therapy, my therapist pointed out a lot. And like right now, I'm 33. I have some of the best friends. And I've like my Irish childhood friends are also amazing. They've always been amazing. But I've like no kind of toxic. Even there was something that happened recently where a friend got a little possessive. And I was like, that's their thing. I'm not even it's not my job to take on the emotional labor to even explain how that's, because they'll figure that out on their own. I'm just going to do me. I can give as much as I can give. If that's not enough, then I can't be that person for them because they are just going to have to find that in someone else. And so that was like huge from therapy too as well. Like I don't have to, I can just, do my best. And if that's not enough, that's fine. I don't know. I don't know if I'm explaining that right, but yeah, I feel like the therapy really did change my life.
No, it's I really appreciate you like sharing all that. And it definitely was something I really wanted to touch upon today. It's something I passionately believe in. I think like everyone's experience is different. Like everyone's, I suppose, experiences growing up is different, but then everyone's experience of therapy is different. And obviously I'm a huge believer in sharing of those life lessons, like being able to tell them, yes, honestly and openly and vulnerable, but also like being able to like have a bit of like a conversation about them that just makes it feel more normal and like less kind of stigmatized or shameful or full of guilt. And kind of with that, as we kind of look to wrap this up, like, and kind of on the theme of therapy, like I'd love to just kind of, I know you're promoting hard right now in terms of traveling around the US. I think you're gonna be back in Ireland with the show Terapy. And tell us a little bit about kind of what people can expect from that, Katie, and then also where they can find out more information in terms of getting tickets, going to see you, because I know it's a busy couple of weeks and months coming up for you too.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? As well, I'll just really quickly say, I think people are afraid to go to therapy in case they'll be diagnosed. And what's really nice in America is everybody's diagnosed with something, and the ones that are diagnosed are very successful. They take the tablets they need, they try them out until they get the ones that they need, they go to the right therapist. So just don't worry about getting a diagnosis or whatever. It really helps. And one of mine was ADHD, and I'd been told as a child, but then with the therapist confirmed it. And it's different in women. I thought it was like, oh, you have to be hyperactive, but it's actually more just like it helped me so much, because then once I knew, I was able to be kind with myself. Like, oh, I'm not just an idiot. It's just I forgot my bag in that store because it's part of I go back, I get it. It feels, when you get whatever confirmation, it just changes your life, because you can be really kind with yourself about it. And so many people have mental health issues. It's actually very normal. And get the help you need. Get the pills. Whatever you need. Okay, that's it.
I just feel like, I would just say that, like, just getting that like sense of understanding, I suppose, or information, like, can, like what you're saying there, like, helped you be more self-compassionate with yourself, like actually give yourself that permission or just that kind of space to be kinder to yourself or to be non-judgmental and to kind of help you then move forward, right? Yeah,
because my mother's probably, whatever mental health issue she has, it's still not an excuse to be like, because she's a grown person, but it's not an excuse to be like horrible and horrific and abusive. But at the same time, you're like, well, if she grew up in a different time, maybe she would have gotten the pills she needs. And I think in America, I have friends who probably have the same condition as she has, but they have the right therapist or whatever they're called, psychiatrist, and they have the right pills that they need, and they're some of like the best, and they're very self-aware, because they're like, oh, I think I'm feeling this way because, I'm getting a bit manic, and you're like, okay, like they're very able to kind of be like, oh, sorry, I'm just like having a moment. And you're like, oh, this is like perfect society where like whatever that I love how open people are with their mental health issues here, because it destigmatizes it a lot. And and then you get to not throw dishes at people. But therapy is about I talk a lot about my grandparents and just how like I feel like the generation between our grandparents and us is very different, the Ireland we grew up in, and I think that's why our generation are starting to like do the work, but they couldn't do that. They were just living in a new Ireland, you know what I mean? So I talk a lot about the differences between like that and, you know, going to therapy and ADHD, in what it was like for me and my experiences with it. And then I talk about my boyfriend and how like I feel how much the therapy has affected our relationship positively. And then I talk about meeting his family in Arizona and how that was so weird, because I come from a broken family and I don't speak to my mother, and then his mother is like so loving that it's so funny because I'm the issue with thinking that's weird. You know, his mom is just so nice and loving and giving, and I'm like, what? I'm like, what is the catch here? So I had to like really like learn to be like comfortable in those situations. So that was another thing that like I think as well, when you find yourself like that's something you're like, oh, I should talk about this in therapy, that I'm finding this weird that someone's loving. And what else? And and sex. Yeah, I talk a lot about sex because my boyfriend is American and I've had way more sexual partners than him. Like I was such a little, like I would pretend to be so innocent and like not, like act like I never have loads of sexual partners, but I actually did, because I have a lot of drunk sex in Ireland. And then you come over here and people are so open about it. It's so great. And it's like, there's no shame. But my boyfriend has way less sexual partners than me, but he's a comedian too. So I would have heard some of his jokes. These American girls, they do sex things that we wouldn't have even heard of in Ireland. Like, they're amazing. But I talk about that kind of like how I could have more sexual partners, but not be as, like, he knows way more about sex stuff. Like, and he, like, porn, and he's really open with a lot of things that I'm like, but trying to not be like, I'm trying to be more open. So that's like fun to kind of like explore the cultural differences.
Do you think that's because like in Ireland, like from like sexual perspective, like obviously growing up, it's like school, it's all like shame based and it's all like fear based, but then we kind of do, but it's like kind of hidden in the corners and kind of you whisper it, whereas I feel like culturally here it's more conversational, like you just sit down and have a cup of coffee and like talk about what happened last night, or
I love
like,
it.
Or I feel like at home you'd be like, so what's happened last night, and it's like you'd be whispering with like.
And I live at my two best friends from my from my teens. They live in Australia, and now we're both so open when we talk, when we voice message. And it's so funny because I wonder if us all just like emigrating and meeting these people who are like, and I think Australians are probably the same too. They're very open with that stuff. So I think that was so great for us to learn about that and be able to talk about it. Has added stuff to our own friendship. But yeah, I think I just think they're more advanced, because even though my boyfriend's had like a percentage of sexual partners I have, he's done stuff that I didn't even know existed. Do you know, like, so and because he's a comedian, I guess we get to talk about it on stage, so it works out really well that neither of us have any embarrassment with it. But yeah, I think I don't know. I do get scared. Like, I do tell him my limitations, because I'm like, I can't. Because this thing, I know some American women who like would like to be choked or like to be slapped or spat on or like let someone come on their face. I'm not letting them come on. I would feel so, that's my limit. Now, maybe in 10 years, but like just standing there, I can't. But like also no shame if you want to. But it's like they have to meet us halfway. I've come a long way.
Yeah.
But that, I would giggle. I still giggle during sex sometimes. So, but yeah, so we just, talk about that. I remember one time a guy being like, I've never laughed as much with sex with you. And I was like, that's a good thing, no? And then we never slept together again. But my boyfriend likes it, so. But it's because it's silly. It's sex. It's, I don't know. Anyway.
No, I think it ties in with like what we talked about earlier, Katie, like taking those conversations that like, and just bringing them into like, just normalize them in terms of like, and I think comedy and how you do it, I think it's such a great way you do it in terms of storytelling, reflection, but not being afraid to kind of get in there and kind of share the the good, the bad, and the ugly with everything, you know, across like the different topics. I think you have a really good gift for that.
I remember doing the Two Johnnies podcast, and so many, I think they turned off the comments because so many guys, like these young countrymen or maybe old countrymen, I don't know, and not to shame all the countries because I know you're from Cavan, but I'm technically Dublin, but whatever. They were like, I was just talking about like STDs and like learning about it and stuff, and they were like, this whore. I was like, okay, you're really like proving my point here.
No, and I think like even just full circle as you wrap up, Katie, like I think that's like from where the conversation started about like where we both grew up and like and kind of coming to America, like that's part of the experience, is meeting people from different cultures, having these conversations to a point where now me and you are sitting here able to half laugh, having like we just spent like 7 minutes talking about sex or whatever it was, and if I was a kid I would have been like, wait, what? Like you can't talk about that stuff publicly. I'm like, my mom and dad listen to this now, I'm freaking out. And
that's how I felt too when I first started the podcast with Des. And I remember my dad joking, because I was like, my brother's really funny, I was like, maybe he'll be a comedian, and he was like, we have one exhibitionist in the family. But he's and it was just because I was just talking online, but he was still really supportive. He was just like, yeah, just don't listen, it's fine. And whereas like my boyfriend's parents, I had to tell them twice not to listen to my podcast, like twice, where they were trying to be so supportive, so much that it was not supportive. Because I was like, I want to talk about stuff that my boyfriend has said that I think is like so out there. But obviously he's okay with me talking about it, but we don't need his parents then. But yeah, but my dad, he actually turned out to be really supportive with it. And He was just like, I'm just so glad you never did drugs. And I never did. So that's why if you want to do a sex podcast, don't do drugs. Okay, you have to have something you can balance your parents. But you can't be doing drugs and doing a sex podcast.
That's some great advice. It's last question for you, Katie. So I'm definitely myself really looking forward to seeing you on tour or seeing the next special. For people who wants to find out more, where can they get you? Where's tickets, information, all that kind of stuff?
So on my website, I have all the links to my tickets. Finally, just for road gigs. But if I'm in the city, I'm usually at New York Comedy Club, or you can just see on my Instagram. I'll share where I am in the city, because a lot of those are just showcase shows. So my road gigs are where you get to see the new hour. I am doing a good chunk of the hour in New York City at Union Hall on the 16th. Will this be out by then?
Yeah,
16th?
brilliant.
Okay, great. Vivian O'Callaghan is opening. So usually when you do comedy, you'd have like a comedian open, but because it's before St. Patrick's Day, I asked her to do it. So she's Vivian in NYC on Instagram, and she does a lot of like the Irish language. Yeah, and she does a lot of like stories and stuff. And I thought that would be really fun to open a kind of pre-St. Patrick's Day show. And I'm going to interview her before doing stand-up, so that I can really ask like, for even just Irish who come just to feel like, oh, this is like a fun sense of home, but for non-Irish to come and really learn, because a lot of people don't even know we have our own language.
I know.
I mean, some of us don't even have our own language because we don't know how to speak it, but I'm working on it. So I'm doing the Molly in Irish course.
Brilliant. So that's in the Irish Centre, is it? Or is she?
No, she's online, Molly in Irish, I believe it is. Okay. But she gave me I don't know if it was like a trial or something. I don't know what it is, how long it's going to be there, but I need to learn really quickly. And my cats
by March 16th.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah, there won't be in full Irish. I'm just going to ask her questions about it, like what's jellyfish? That's a fun one, seal snot. Or like Threesome is Festival of the 6 Feet, or Ladybug is God's Little Cow. So things like that, or how people use Irish words in the English language and they don't. So all that stuff. That'll be fun. So come. That's at Union
definitely.
Hall.
We'll add a link to that into the show notes if we can, because I definitely would encourage, and if I'm in town, I might try to get to that myself. There's still tickets available now.
Yeah, it said going fast today, but I don't know what that means. Sometimes it does that and then it stops going fast. I think maybe I just like opened it when maybe like one person was buying a ticket, but I immediately screenshot it and put it on Instagram. It's going fast.
We'll put that out for sure. And then just want to say thanks so much for taking the time today, and thanks for joining us on the Real Talks podcast. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Real Talks podcast. The Real Talks podcast is hosted by me, Alan O'Mara, and produced by Mary Kate Boylan. Video and audio were mixed and edited by Jack Deacon at Plural Video and Design. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Real Talks podcast on your preferred platform to keep up to date with our new weekly episodes. You can also sign up for our newsletter at www.realtalks.news. You can also follow the podcast at Hey Real Talks on Instagram and TikTok, and you can follow me there by searching at AOM the Cat. Thanks for being here, and we'll be back next week. This episode of the Real Talks podcast is brought to you thanks to the MGF Group, a premier building material supplier in New York City. Whether you're a seasoned contractor or a DIY enthusiast, the MGF Group offers a wide range of premium building materials to suit your every need. From cement to lumber, protection materials and safety nets, the MGF Group has got it all under one roof and pride themselves in timely and reliable delivery. Check out themgfgroup.com for more information.
This episode of the Real Talks podcast is brought to you thanks to the Taylor Public House. Right on the doorstep of Madison Square Garden, the Taylor Public House is the perfect place to connect with family or friends before taking in a concert or sports event. The Taylor is known for its warm welcome, classy ambiance, and comfort food. It has 2 floors, 3 bars, and 2 private event spaces for parties and gatherings. Be sure to stop by and experience the Taylor Public House for yourself, located in the heart of Midtown Manhattan on the corner of 35th Street and 8th Avenue. Check out thetaylornyc.com for more information.